Captain Leo Marsden steered the Eclipse, a sleek starship built more for speed than combat, through the uncharted territories at the galaxy's edge. Known among the outlaw fringes as a skilled smuggler with a penchant for taking risks, Leo's latest venture into the hazardous asteroid belt of Krillon promised to be his most daring yet. His scanners picked up an anomaly, a signal emanating from a craft of unknown origin. Curiosity piqued, Leo navigated closer, his instincts warning him of potential danger, yet unable to turn away from a possible salvage opportunity. As he approached, the craft became visible, a small, exotic-looking ship with markings unfamiliar to him, clearly of alien design and badly damaged. Its hull was scarred with signs of conflict, possibly a skirmish with pirates common to this desolate part of space. With practiced precision, Leo maneuvered the Eclipse alongside the drifting vessel, deploying his ship's docking mechanism. Inside the alien craft, he found chaos and ruin, remnants of a struggle evident in every corner. But it was the figure slumped against the control panel that drew his immediate attention. An alien woman, her skin luminescent even in the dim light, bound and seemingly left for dead. Leo cut through her restraints, noting her cautious, fearful gaze as she braced herself, clearly expecting the worst from her rescuer. "Easy, I'm not gonna hurt you," Leo assured her as he checked her for injuries. Her eyes, a striking shade of molten silver, watched him warily, yet beneath the wariness, he saw a flicker of hope. Once aboard the Eclipse, Leo offered Seraphine, the name she gave after some coaxing, food and medical attention. As her strength returned, so did her spirit, and with it, stories of her people, the Zeltrax. Renowned across the galaxy for their empathic abilities and exotic beauty, the Zeltrax had long been targets for slavers and warlords eager to exploit their talents for profit. Seraphine explained that she had been captured by a faction seeking to use her abilities to manipulate and control, turning her into a weapon against her will. Her escape had been desperate, a barely successful attempt during a transit through less patrolled space, which ended when her ship took damage in a skirmish. "I expected death, not rescue," Seraphine admitted quietly as they sat in the Eclipse's small mess area, the stars outside the viewport a tapestry of light against the infinite dark. "You could still hand me over to those who hunt me. I am worth a fortune to the right buyer." Leo considered her words, the weight of her trust apparent in her gaze. He had always been a loner, a man who trusted only in the cold logic of profit and survival. Yet something in Seraphine's plight, her dignity in the face of fear, stirred a protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed. "I'm no hero," Leo stated, his voice gruff with uncharacteristic emotion. "But I'm not in the business of trading lives. You're safe here, Seraphine. I'll help you get to where you need to go." The gratitude that lit up Seraphine's face was as bright as any star, and in that moment, Leo felt an unfamiliar resolve settle within him. Together, they plotted a course to the nearest neutral station, where Seraphine could find sanctuary. But as the Eclipse sailed through the void, Leo found himself increasingly drawn to his mysterious passenger, her presence a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter. A puzzle that intrigued and challenged him in ways he had never anticipated. As the stars whirled past, a new journey began, not just through space, but through the complexities of trust, compassion, and perhaps something deeper still. Days passed as the Eclipse sailed through the black reaches of space. The tension that had initially lingered between Leo and Seraphine began to ease, though the air around them still crackled with a subtle charge. Seraphine, though grateful for her rescue, remained guarded, her instincts trained by years of evading capture and betrayal. Yet Leo's actions spoke louder than words. He treated her with respect, gave her space, and never pressed her about her past. One evening, while working side by side to repair a malfunctioning engine on the Eclipse, Seraphine finally opened up. She spoke about her people, the Zeltrax, a race known not only for their beauty, but for their unique empathic abilities that made them both coveted and feared across the galaxy. "Zeltrax can sense emotions, amplify them," she explained, her voice soft yet edged with pain. "It's why we are hunted. People think they can use us, to manipulate others, to control, to turn us into tools for war or pleasure." Leo looked up from his repairs, studying her as she spoke. "That why they were after you? To use your abilities? Seraphine nodded, her silver eyes distant as she recounted her escape. I was being transported to a warlord who intended to use me to control his enemies. I managed to sabotage the ship, but it left me stranded. If you hadn't found me, Her voice trailed off, but Leo could hear the unspoken words. She would have died out there, alone and forgotten. They're still hunting you, aren't they? Leo asked, already knowing the answer. They are, she confirmed, her gaze meeting his. But I'm tired of running. The silence that followed was heavy with shared understanding. Leo, too, was a man who had spent much of his life running, from his past, from the law, from anything that threatened the solitude he had built around himself. But now, with Seraphine by his side, that solitude was beginning to feel less like freedom and more like a prison. I'm no stranger to running, Leo admitted after a pause. But maybe it's time we stop. Seraphine's eyes flickered with something akin to hope, but also disbelief. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop running and start fighting back, Leo said, the resolve in his voice surprising even him. You've got abilities they fear. I've got a ship and a lot of firepower. Together we might have a chance. Seraphine hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. She had spent her entire life being hunted, and the idea of standing her ground was both terrifying and exhilarating. But looking at Leo, she saw a kindred spirit, someone who understood the pain of being chased, of having to hide who you were. An alliance? She asked, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Leo nodded. An alliance. For the first time since they met, Seraphine's smile was genuine. Then let's give them a reason to be afraid. Over the next few days, Leo and Seraphine worked together, not just as allies, but as partners. The plan to confront her hunters and end the chase once and for all began to take shape. They plotted a course toward the nearest neutral station, where they could gather intelligence on the warlord tracking her. But before they could take any steps forward, they knew they had to be ready. Seraphine, though skilled at hiding, was less familiar with combat tactics, something Leo quickly noticed as he prepared her for the inevitable confrontation. They spent long hours training in the ship's small cargo hold, Leo teaching her how to handle various weapons, how to move quickly in zero-gravity combat situations, and how to think like someone who was always a step ahead of his enemies. You're not just a target, Leo said one afternoon as they sparred. You've got more power than you think. You've been running, but now you need to take control. Seraphine listened intently, pushing her body beyond the limits she had known before. She had never thought of herself as a warrior, but with Leo's guidance, she began to realize that she could be more than just prey. There was strength in her, not just in her abilities, but in her will to survive, and Leo was helping her harness it. As their training sessions continued, something shifted between them. The bond that had started as an alliance deepened into trust. Leo's gruff exterior, his usual walls of emotional distance, began to crumble in Seraphine's presence. She saw through his defenses, understanding that beneath the hardened smuggler was a man who had suffered loss, who had learned to shield himself from pain by keeping others at arm's length. One night, after another exhausting day of preparation, they found themselves sitting together in the cockpit of the Eclipse, watching the stars swirl past in the vast expanse of space. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding of two people who had come to rely on one another. "Why did you save me?" Seraphine asked quietly, her eyes focused on the stars. "You didn't have to. Most would have sold me or left me for dead." Leo didn't answer right away, his gaze distant as he considered the question. "I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of," he finally said. "But leaving someone to die isn't one of them." Seraphine studied him for a moment, sensing the layers of guilt and regret beneath his words. She had seen that look before in others, people who had been forced to make impossible choices to survive. But Leo was different. He had saved her when he had nothing to gain, and in doing so, he had revealed a part of himself that she doubted he showed to anyone else. "I'm glad you didn't," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that surprised even her. Leo turned to her, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. There was something unspoken in the air between them, an attraction that had been building quietly, a bond forged not just from trust, but from something deeper, something neither of them had anticipated. "I'm glad too," Leo murmured, his voice rough but sincere. The stars outside continued to twinkle in the void, but in the small cockpit of the eclipse, the universe felt smaller, more intimate. The space between them seemed to shrink, and though neither of them said anything more, they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the days stretched into weeks, the tension between Leo and Seraphine deepened, not just because of the impending danger, but because of the unspoken desire that lingered between them. Their alliance, once rooted in survival, had evolved into something far more personal. Every moment spent together, every brush of skin as they passed in the narrow corridors of the eclipse, only heightened the palpable energy between them. Leo had always been a man who kept his emotions buried, a necessity in his line of work. But Seraphine was different. There was something about her, something beyond her exotic beauty and the mystery of her Zeltrax heritage. She had awakened something in him, something primal, something he had long suppressed in his solitary life. He found himself watching her more often, his gaze lingering on her as she moved with a grace that was almost otherworldly. One evening, while they were reviewing the final stages of their plan to confront the warlords, the air between them thickened with unspoken tension. Seraphine leaned over the navigation panel, her eyes scanning the data, but Leo wasn't paying attention to the readouts. His gaze drifted to her, drawn by the soft glow of her skin, the curve of her neck, the way her hair shimmered in the dim light of the cockpit. She must have felt his eyes on her, because she turned to face him, her expression unreadable, yet her silver eyes flickered with something more than just the burden of their mission. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was charged, electric, as though the very air in the ship was alive with the weight of their emotions. Leo. Seraphine's voice was a whisper, filled with uncertainty but also longing. She had felt the pull between them, had been resisting it for weeks, unsure of whether to give in to the growing connection or keep her distance. But now, standing so close to him, the temptation felt unbearable. Leo stepped forward, his heart pounding, his resolve crumbling under the force of what had been building between them. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingertips grazing her skin. The touch sent a shiver down Seraphine's spine, and her breath hitched as she looked up into his eyes, her guard slipping. "I've been trying to keep this professional," Leo murmured, his voice thick with desire. "But I don't think I can anymore." Seraphine's heart raced, her emotions a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. She had never imagined that she would feel this way for a human, let alone one like Leo. But he had shown her kindness, trust, and strength when she'd expected cruelty or indifference. And now, standing here with him, she couldn't deny the fire that burned inside her, the need that had grown in the space between their stolen glances and quiet moments. "You don't have to," she whispered, stepping closer, her eyes never leaving his. The distance between them disappeared as Leo cupped her face in his hands, pulling her gently toward him. The kiss that followed was slow, tentative at first, as if both of them were testing the boundaries of this new, unexpected connection. But the restraint quickly faded, replaced by an intensity that neither of them could control. The kiss deepened, and Seraphine melted into his embrace, her body responding to his touch in ways she hadn't anticipated. For Seraphine, the kiss was unlike anything she had experienced before. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, raw, filled with a need she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. The empathy that coursed through her as a Zeltrax amplified everything, flooding her senses with Leo's desire, his passion, and, beneath it all, the depth of his loneliness. She had felt the emotions of others before, but never like this, never so intense. Leo, too, was lost in the moment. The walls he had spent years building around his heart were crumbling, falling apart under the weight of the feelings he hadn't let himself acknowledge until now. In Seraphine, he had found something he didn't know he had been searching for, a connection that transcended the danger, the fear, the coldness of the galaxy. As their kiss deepened, Seraphine's body reacted to Leo in ways she hadn't expected. Her Zeltrax nature, long suppressed, began to stir, amplifying the pleasure that coursed through her. She gasped against his lips, the sensations overwhelming, almost too much to bear. Seraphine nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of fear and hope. She had spent so long running, so long hiding from her past, but with Leo, she felt like she had finally found someone who would stand by her side, no matter what. "And when the warlords come?" Seraphine asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. Leo's eyes hardened with determination. "We'll be ready." As they drifted into a quiet, peaceful sleep, wrapped in each other's warmth, they knew that the battle ahead would be fierce. But they also knew that they were no longer alone. They had each other. The peaceful hours Leo and Seraphine had shared became fleeting memories as the reality of their situation came crashing down upon them. Their alliance had shifted into something deeper, something more profound, but the threat looming over them was as real as ever. They had stirred the hornet's nest, and the warlords who sought Seraphine were closing in. As the eclipse cruised through the stars, the ship's proximity alarms blared, jolting them both from their brief reprieve. Leo rushed to the cockpit, his instincts kicking into high gear. He scanned the readouts, and his heart sank as a swarm of red blips appeared on the radar. The warlord ships had found them. "Damn it," Leo muttered under his breath, his fingers dancing across the controls. Seraphine appeared by his side, her face pale but composed. She had expected this, and now it was time to face the very danger she had been fleeing from. "How many?" Seraphine asked, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "4 ships," Leo replied, grimly assessing their odds. "And they've got firepower. This is going to get rough." Seraphine's hands clenched at her sides, her body tense. She had never felt so vulnerable, even with all the training Leo had given her. But she knew she couldn't back down now. These warlords would never stop hunting her, unless she and Leo ended the chase once and for all. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with determination. Leo shot her a quick glance, admiring her courage. "We're outgunned, but we're faster. I'll maneuver us through the asteroid field up ahead. It's risky, but it's our best shot to lose them." Seraphine nodded, trusting Leo's instincts. As he steered the eclipse toward the dense field of rock and debris, she could feel the hum of the ship's engines vibrating through her body. The warlord ships were gaining on them, their weapon systems locking onto the eclipse with deadly precision. "They're preparing to fire," Seraphine warned, her eyes flicking to the control panel. Leo cursed under his breath, accelerating the ship as the first volley of plasma bolts streaked past them. The eclipse veered sharply, weaving between the massive asteroids, each maneuver more dangerous than the last. The ship rattled violently as they dodged incoming fire, the warlord vessels hot on their tail. "We can't outrun them forever," Seraphine said, her voice tight as she gripped the edge of the co-pilot's seat. "I know," Leo muttered, his jaw clenched as he focused on the path ahead. "But if we can get through this field, we might have a chance to turn the tables." The chase was relentless. Plasma blasts illuminated the asteroids, sending debris spiraling in all directions. The eclipse dodged and twisted, narrowly avoiding the deadly explosions that erupted around them. But even as Leo pushed the ship to its limits, the warlord ships stayed close, their weapons continuing to fire with ruthless precision. Seraphine could feel the tension in the air, her empathic abilities heightened by the intensity of the moment. She sensed the cold, focused determination of the warlords pursuing them, their minds set on capturing her at all costs. But she also felt Leo's resolve, his fierce determination to protect her, no matter the odds. As they neared the densest part of the asteroid field, Leo's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "Hold on," he said, his voice tight with concentration. Before Seraphine could respond, Leo angled the ship into a sharp dive, weaving between the largest asteroids at breakneck speed. The pursuing ships followed, their weapons blazing, but Leo's strategy had shifted. He wasn't just running, he was setting a trap. With expert precision, Leo maneuvered the eclipse through a tight cluster of rocks, spinning the ship at the last second to avoid a massive asteroid. The warlord ships weren't as nimble. One of them clipped the asteroid, sending it careening into another, and in an instant, 2 of the enemy ships exploded in a fiery blaze. "Two down," Leo muttered, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Seraphine's heart raced as she realized what he was doing. "You're using the asteroids as cover." "Damn right I am," Leo replied, "and we've still got 2 more to go." With renewed focus, Leo continued to lead the remaining warlord ships through the deadly asteroid field. It was a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with the asteroids acting as both shield and weapon. One wrong move and the Eclipse could be destroyed just as easily as their pursuers. But Leo was in his element. With Seraphine by his side, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. He wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting for something more. And then, in one final, daring maneuver, Leo steered the Eclipse through a narrow passage between two colliding asteroids. The last two warlord ships, unable to follow his precise trajectory, were caught in the collision, their ships crushed in a massive explosion of rock and fire. Seraphine exhaled, her heart still racing as the silence of space returned. They had done it. They had escaped, for now. Leo glanced over at her, his expression fierce yet relieved. That was close. Seraphine nodded, her mind still reeling from the intensity of the battle. Closer than I would have liked. For a moment, they stood there, the weight of everything unsaid hanging in the air between them. Seraphine leaned into his touch, closing her eyes as she let herself feel the warmth of his hands, the steadiness of his presence. In him, she had found something she hadn't even known she needed, something that made the fear, the danger, all of it bearable. When she opened her eyes, she saw the same emotions reflected in his. Then we fight, she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. And we win. Leo nodded, his expression fierce. Together. And as the Eclipse set a course for the outer rim, Seraphine felt the flicker of hope ignite within her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. The journey to the Krillon Rim Station was marked by a tense calm. Both Leo and Seraphine knew that this was the eye of the storm, an uneasy peace before the final confrontation that would either free Seraphine from her hunters, or trap them both in a deadly game of cat and mouse forever. As they neared the station, Leo received an encrypted transmission. The warlords were regrouping, and a bounty had been placed on Seraphine's head. This meant their final stand was imminent. The station itself was a sprawling, lawless hub, where mercenaries, traitors, and outlaws converged under the shadow of corrupt deals and whispered betrayals. As Leo and Seraphine disembarked from the Eclipse, they knew they were walking into a trap. But there was no choice. They had to confront the warlord who had led the charge against her. The key to ending this was in his hands. "Stay close," Leo muttered as they navigated the crowded, dingy corridors of the station, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the station, where the warlord, Kazor, was waiting. Kazor was infamous, an intelligent, ruthless strategist who had amassed power across multiple star systems. And now, he had his eyes on Seraphine, determined to use her empathic powers to control the most powerful factions in the galaxy. But Leo had a plan. They reached a darkened chamber deep in the bowels of the station, where Kazor's forces were assembled. The air was thick with tension as Kazor stepped forward, his towering frame casting a long shadow. His alien features were cold, calculating, and the malice in his gaze made Seraphine's skin crawl. "I knew you would come," Kazor said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "You have nowhere else to run, Seraphine. Your powers belong to me now." Leo stood in front of Seraphine, his blaster held low but ready. "She's not going anywhere with you," he said, his tone as sharp as the edge of a blade. Kazor sneered, motioning to his armed guards who surrounded the room. "You think you can protect her from me? You're outnumbered and outgunned." Seraphine's heart raced as Kazor closed in, but instead of retreating, she stood her ground. She could feel Leo's strength beside her, his determination giving her courage. With a deep breath, she focused her empathic energy, tapping into the very emotions that Kazor had been trying to exploit. "I'm not your weapon," Seraphine said, her voice steady despite the fear swirling inside her. "And I'm not afraid of you." With a surge of energy, Seraphine unleashed her full empathic power, overwhelming Kazor's mind with his own emotions, fear, desperation, and the realization that he was losing control. The warlord staggered, his cold confidence crumbling as Seraphine's power enveloped him. At that moment, Leo struck, delivering a final, decisive blow that sent Kazor crashing to the ground. The chamber fell silent as Kazor's forces scattered, their leader defeated. The war was over, the battle was won, but the cost of victory weighed heavily on both Leo and Seraphine. They stood in the ruins of the warlord's stronghold, the echoes of the fight still reverberating in their minds. Khazor's forces had been routed, and with their leader gone, the bounty on Seraphine's head would soon be lifted. But the toll of their journey, the constant running, the fear, the danger, had left scars that would take time to heal. As they made their way back to the eclipse, Seraphine felt the weight of the past weeks begin to lift. For the first time in her life, she wasn't looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next threat to appear. She was free, truly free. And she had Leo to thank for that. They boarded the eclipse in silence, exhaustion evident in their every movement. Leo guided the ship into the safety of hyperspace, and for the first time in a long time, there was no imminent danger, no enemies to face. The galaxy, vast and unknowable, lay ahead of them, filled with possibilities. Leo turned to Seraphine, his gaze soft but tired. "It's over." Seraphine nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "It is. Thanks to you." Leo shook his head. "We did this together. You were stronger than you think." Seraphine met his eyes, her heart swelling with gratitude and something more, something deeper. "I wouldn't have made it without you." For a long moment, they stood there. The hum of the ship's engines the only sound between them. The connection that had grown between them over the course of their journey, the bond forged in the fires of battle and the quiet moments of trust, was undeniable. Seraphine stepped closer, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out, gently taking Leo's hand in hers. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Leo looked down at their joined hands, then back up into her eyes. "We go wherever we want. We make our own future." Seraphine smiled, a warmth spreading through her. For so long she had been a prisoner of her own fate, bound by the expectations of others. But now, standing here with Leo, she felt like she had finally taken control of her destiny. "Together?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Leo's expression softened, his hand tightening around hers. Together. As the eclipse soared through the stars, leaving the remnants of their past behind, Leo and Seraphine knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But they had faced the worst the galaxy had to offer, and they had come out stronger for it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. In the vastness of space, they had found something they hadn't expected, each other. And with that, they were ready to embrace the future, whatever it held. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and full of promise. And for the first time in their lives, Leo and Seraphine felt truly free.